so cool.
Okay, here we go for our in-studio interview with Kelly O'Connor. Cheers, coffee. Cheers. Oh, two moms off duty. Yes. Okay, so first things first, we're here in your home, your beautiful house in your home studio. This is one of your pieces that you're working on right now. Mm-hmm. The first question that has come in from our audience on Instagram is, how have you managed life, mom, work, hold that balance as you've been working up to Deepfake, your exhibition?
Well, it's taken some time. I think that now that I'm in my 40s, I've kind of started to figure things out. Yeah. Because for so long, I think I was really doing so much.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did these things, you know, like I had a full-time job for 17 years where I worked at a contemporary art museum, which was so great. It was like, I got to meet so many great people in the art world, and it really helped motivate me to create ambitious work. But I made the hard decision a year ago to leave that job. Yeah. And so now I've created a lot more space for my studio practice. You know, I don't know how I did all that before, because even now, just with the studio practice, being a wife, having 3 kids, that is a lot.
Yes.
So I'm like, you know, the part-time bus driver. I take the kids every day to school and I pick them up each day. Yeah. And that's a big part of the day. You know, I do most of the household management, like the cooking and cleaning.
And your amazing kitchen.
Yes.
Which is so you.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll get a clip of that.
Well, I am so lucky. My husband is a very good cook too. So I do need to give him credit for that. But you know, that all can be very stressful. Right. And so I really had to find something, and thank goodness I did. I found exercise, which has really helped me manage my stress. And I've identified an exercise that I can do in a very short amount of time. So I think that that's given me a lot of structure to help, you know, accomplish these ambitious things like having a solo show.
Right. How much work goes into a solo show? Like, how many pieces did you create for Deepfake?
So for the show, I did 12 works, 12 new pieces, and I really tried to push myself to create something different. You know, this was going to be my first solo show, being a full-time artist. And so I really wanted to be ambitious with the work. Yeah. I started working on this back last spring, about this time. So really I had an entire year to prepare for the show.
Wow. So then when you, as your friend, I'm dying to know, do you know the theme before you start, or does it kind of, you just kind of start and then it comes to you as you go? Because you have a very specific style that you typically work with?
I think that kind of leads into one of the other questions, like what process do I enjoy the most?
In your creating, like what specific piece of the work do you like the most?
So I feel like I love the like hunt, you know, like the research part of it. It's almost like I've heard my friends who, you know, do things like go to estate sales. They love the hunt of finding.
I say, yes, like is the high.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's like a big part of it is I start in, you know, in my work, I work in collage. So I do a lot of appropriation of imagery. Yes. And so that's the start of it, is like kind of seeing that imagery that's going to really turn me on. And so I think that I start with that, and then I start kind of like working through some of the processes, and that's where the theme starts to reveal itself. I start to see the thread.
Interesting.
And I also am like, you know, looking at what's happening in the real world.
Right.
Like oftentimes my work is very nostalgic and vintage, but I feel like it really speaks to some of the things that are actually happening in contemporary society with artificial intelligence. So I just really started to think about those sort of concepts when I was developing the show.
Well, you know what's interesting too is, as somebody who also likes history, and to go down the rabbit hole of nostalgic culture, I find that there's so much that relates to the now when you go down that research rabbit hole into the history.
Absolutely.
You're like, oh, wait, we're still facing this, or this makes sense, and this maybe led to here. And it's so inspiring to draw those parallels. And I think like that's the part of the creative process and the research process that is like the thrill of the hunt, right?
Right.
It's the putting the pieces together
Yes.
to make a universal message out of what your specific style and like medium is. I am dying to know, like, where do you go to find the materials that you use? How do you source these?
So a lot of the material I was working in before was mostly paper.
Okay.
And so, you know, I've always been attracted to this sort of memorabilia of places like Disneyland,
Right.
and, you know, things like postcards, all this like historic memorabilia from these sort of destinations, but also all the, you know, like books and childhood stories like Alice in Wonderland, and just finding all these things that they're not even really from my childhood. I'm a child of the 80s, but they're more so from my dad's childhood. Right. And so I feel like he really introduced us to a lot of this memorabilia. And I've collected those. I wish that I could say I've, you know, gone to things like estate sales, and I think that would be a lot more exciting to find these things there. But because I am so limited on time,
right,
I kind of know what I'm looking for,
yeah,
and I go straight to sources
right,
like Etsy and eBay, and I find a lot of that material there.
So is that where you find these reflective mirrors?
So it's interesting. I actually do find these materials on those sites as well, which you wouldn't think so. So now I'm working in mirror and these both acrylic and glass mirrors, and then also incorporating tile, like ceramic tile, enamel tile, glass tile. And I'm finding a lot of those materials on sources like Etsy. I feel like they have a lot of the more small batch sort of manufacturers. And so I'm able to find some very interesting, unique materials.
As you have built exhibitions or singular pieces in the past, is there one work that you feel most represents like the core of who you are? Like,
okay, so it's interesting because I'm building this big mirror right now. It's a much larger mirror than the one that's currently in the exhibition. And I, you know, my last mirror, there were a lot of kind of mirror on the wall, like from like the fairy tales where the princess is central, like Cinderella and Snow White. I think that's where we first saw the magic mirror, was in Snow White. But for this one, I was thinking about the metaphor of the mirror in Alice in Wonderland and through the looking glass. And so Alice was one of the first subjects I really, like, something that really spoke to me. So when I was an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, I had this wonderful professor, Melissa Miller, and that was the first time she really kind of pushed us to think about the subject matter and how it related to our processes. And so I stumbled upon Alice in Wonderland, the original Alice in Wonderland. Wow. So this is the one that is illustrated by John Tennell.
Okay.
And at UT, we have the Harry Ransom Center. And so they had the original illustrations.
Oh, wow.
The like original lithographs.
Wow.
And so Alice in this book, it's so interesting because, you know, she's sort of this young girl, but the illustrations portray her in a very dark way, like very dark eyes. There's something obviously going on beneath the surface of this story. And the more I investigated, you know, the history of the author, and there was actually like a girl that this was written after, it just started to reveal these very deeper stories. And that was a form of inspiration to me. And so I feel like the Alice work is very much like Alice is almost like an alter ego for me. So that's what I would say is like the work that's like most true Alice, to me at my core, but honestly, all the work really is. I love swimming pools. I grew up
a swimmer.
A swimmer, as an athlete, as a swimmer, but I also grew up as somebody who was dropped off at the pool every day, neighborhood pool, and then picked up later in the day. So I lived at the swimming pool. Yeah. Anytime I think of going on vacation, like the water is like just my idea of paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of water in a lot of pools in a lot of your work.
But also the Disney work, Well,
that's a bit. I want to talk about the Disney work. Okay. Well, also I want to talk about Disney and I want to talk about Wizard of Oz because I'm looking across your room here and there is a Dorothy. I remember the last time I came here was several years ago when we were writing a piece on you, which was so much fun when we were creating another story together. But you had. A lot of that story that we talked about before focused on Wizard of Oz and how the connections with your family to somebody's name.
Yes,
whose name Dorothy?
So my grandmother on my mother's side is named Dorothy.
Yes.
And then my aunt is named Glinda.
That's right. Okay.
Yes.
So the duality of Glinda, this particular piece I find that's in Deepfake, I find so striking and so fascinating, and just the entire theme about like the who's behind the curtain.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about your inspiration with those pieces in the Wizard of Oz?
Well, as it relates to Deepfake and this idea of like artificial intelligence, it's almost like in my mind, I don't know if other people will draw this connection, but for me, I started to draw this connection between like what's happening like with this artificial intelligence now and sort of the birth of pop culture. It was like creating these artificial environments. And I mean, they were creating them like more physically,
right?
But it's sort of the same concept. And so like even thinking about Disney, like it's this fabricated environment, but that's what like AI is like creating a very fabricated environment as well.
Technologically, yes. Yeah, that's super interesting. So I guess we could go down. I want to go down the how you got here road, talking about your younger self, and if you could talk to your younger self as a young artist, what piece of advice would you give a young artist now who is just starting out?
Well, I think something that is really important is, you really want to kind of look at yourself and investigate what are the issues that are important to you, because you don't want to be paying attention to what's on trend.
Yep.
Your journey as an artist, like hopefully if it's really important to you, is going to be a lifelong journey. This isn't something you retire from. It's something that you will, do the rest of your life. And so you really want to identify things that are important to you because you're going to spend thousands of hours doing this. I remember early in my career, some of my friends were like, oh, did you see like this person is making work just like yours, or like using hexagons and they're using similar materials and stuff. And I was like, I can't get worried about that. They're going to get really bored cutting tiny little hexagons out. Like it really needs, like it is a very tedious process. Yeah. And if it's not something that's like really special to you and really speaks to your, self, then you're going to give it up so easily.
Yeah.
So, and then also just being patient with the trends, there's going to be movements in art where your art will fall out of fashion, but eventually it will be your time. And I think that's just so important that you just like stay the course and keep on producing work.
When you were first being educated, as an artist, like in taking art classes, I'm assuming this was college.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like in high school, I kind of started to get into, I was always a creative person. Yeah. Like I was surrounded by a mom that worked in quilting and cross stitch. And so craft was what surrounded me, not so much going to museums or painting or things like that. And then in high school, I started to kind of get some credit from like the teachers that are like, oh my gosh, you're like really good at creating things out of ceramic. And so that's what kind of got me interested in it, but I had no idea what being an artist was.
Interesting.
And I, after high school, I thought, okay, that's what I want to do, but I don't think I knew what that meant.
Well, I'm just super curious because you deal with very specific materials.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever paint? Did you ever?
I did.
Okay.
So I think that is also something so important is if you are really interested in being a professional artist is that you do those core classes. So I took life drawing for a year, life drawing 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I remember one summer after high school at San Antonio College, it was so much fun. I took drawing the whole summer and it was every day for 4 hours a day. So it was very intense. And then I took, painting, I took color photography, I took a lot of installation based practices at the University of Texas. But I sort of gravitated to the conceptual side of the installation art and then the color photography side and really started to work in like a works on paper collage sort of situation. Also, collage is something that is very easy to do in your home. It's not toxic. You can work very small scale. You can do things pretty immediately. So it was really something that was easy for me to jump into with a home studio.
That is really interesting. So so being an artist, it's a risk, right?
Yes.
But I also feel like as a creative person, it's more of a risk not to be an artist.
Right.
But that being said, everybody thinks art is a risk. Like being an artist is a risk.
Right.
What was your greatest motivator to pursue art?
I think I was so naive.
Yeah.
Like I think it would scare me if like one of my kids came to me and said, I want to be an artist.
Oh my God. You're like, no, don't do it.
I know. But you know what? It's like also, yeah, it would have been a huge risk if I hadn't have done it. And then I ended up super depressed. I come from a family of accountants. If I was an accountant, that would be just so boring.
Yeah, I know.
And no offense to accountants, we need them. But if you are such a creative person and you don't have an outlet for that, like that's going to lead to some issues down the road. So I do just recommend, I think I got really lucky. I got a job right out of college where, I had benefits and healthcare and all those things, but a lot of that is not available for artists.
Right.
And so I think it is good to get some hard skills in there, like graphic design. I think is always a great thing to have under your belt, like just knowing how to use those programs like Illustrator and Photoshop. Like that is going to lead to jobs that will help support your studio.
Well, and I found too that going in and working for anyone other than just yourself, at the beginning when you graduate and I started in nonprofit. And so that at times felt like a lot of responsibility to be 22, 23, 24, because you have to wear many hats.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And so, but I think that was great experience because then now I find like many years down the road, and I'm curious if you feel the same, like your experience because you're a business owner, right? So
exactly.
like you have to go through learning how to work for other people so that then you can work for yourself. But it's a very different feeling because you're the only person who can finish your work on time. Like you're the only person who can get your deadline for the exhibition.
I think that set me up for being like an excellent project manager.
Yeah.
So I know how to identify what needs to be done, like priorities. I can identify like what should be delegated, what I should be doing myself. But yeah, absolutely. Working for other people teaches you a lot. And like, you might see some of those relationships as failures, but they always teach you something. Like working with teams it's huge. And I think it just helps you even when you think you're like, a sole business owner working in your studio. You're still working with fabricators, you're working with framers, photographers, gallerists, And that's a lot of relationships that need to be managed.
Yes, yes. Speaking of relationships, is there one person or a few people who you kind of credit to inspiring your life as an artist or your journey as an artist?
Well, absolutely. I've had some amazing teachers. So one of my professors, Margot Sawyer, she was my professor at UT, and she not only helped, shape me as an artist and like aesthetically, but also she really helped me think about being ambitious and encouraged me to apply for internships. So I did an internship at the Chinati Foundation out in Marfa, Texas, and I did a conservation internship, which really helped lead me to my job as a registrar, collections manager at Ruby City. So Margot, was super instrumental, and we're still dear friends to this day.
So nice.
But then also Linda Pace. I worked for Linda Pace, who was an artist, a collector, philanthropist, who was the founder of the organization I worked for, Linda Pace Foundation. And I was first tasked with working on this amazing mirrored igloo for her. And it's so interesting how those sort of mosaic patterns have really influenced my work. And now working in these mirror pieces, like I don't think I would be making this type of work if it wasn't for that experience of being her studio assistant.
How old were you at the time?
I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
So that was like a huge responsibility, a huge opportunity. I mean, it was funny because I look back on that moment. I was like, waitress down on the Riverwalk at Paisanos.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember telling my boss, like, I am leaving. I found my dream job. And he's like, so inappropriate, like asking like how much money I was going to make, which was such a, embarrassing amount of money. Like, it's so not very much. And that's nothing negative towards Linda. It's just what people were paid
at the time. And here in San Antonio.
And at a nonprofit and working in the art world. But yeah, it was so worth it. Like, that was an amazing opportunity. And not just looking at, like, as a waitress, I was making $200 a night, and then I was going to only make like $200 a week.
Yeah.
It's more about like, how is this going to what are the opportunities
on the rest of your life?
Yeah, it turned into a 17-year career with,
Absolutely. And I think that's another big piece of advice for young people too, is like, I remember at that age getting a lot of pressure from, it just felt like adults in general. As soon as you got a job, they were like, well, when are you going to ask for a raise? And it's like, there was so much, you have to put in so much extra time and so many extra hours that, like, the money, if I could tell a young person, it'd be like, don't think about money for 10 years. Literally don't think about money for 10 years, aside from being able to survive. Then put everything you can into getting every skill and true relationship and connection and opportunity. And then it'll just work out. Like, once you put in those amount of hours, something will work out and the money will alleviate and it will start to get easier and easier. But especially as like a creative person, I think that you never know what you're currently doing in the now, like 5-10 years down the road. You're like, oh, that made sense. That's why I did that. That led to that. That led to that.
Yes. You got to show your value and you got to prove like that you're indispensable.
Yes.
And that's when you ask for the raise,
absolutely,
the new title. Like, you got to show, like, and then you got to really identify those opportunities, which I think you were saying is like, lots of times in those worlds, there's a lot of like projects happening. You want to be working with the expert. You don't want to just meeting expectations. You want to be trying to identify what is going to, be something I can add to my resume and show like I can work on projects that are really important and big.
There's a moment that we were just talking about before this interview where your dreams all of a sudden become reality, and they're going to become reality. Like, let's say even you starting Deepfake.
Right.
where you're like, oh man, now like the aspiration and the like giddiness, then all of a sudden it clicks and you're like, oh, now I have to do this. Like I have to do this work, and then it becomes like fear for a little bit. You know, you're like, oh, you're kind of scared, afraid. What I'm curious about vulnerability.
Yes.
In your work and how much you put into it from a like how comfortable are you with being vulnerable, or are you not, and you want the like in your pieces is kind of a universal truth that you're kind of wanting your viewer to take away from it, or is it very much like you go into it knowing like this is the part of me that I'm putting into this, you know? What is your comfortability level with vulnerability?
Well, I think it is so important as an artist to be vulnerable. And I think that's one of the biggest jobs, right? Is being an artist, to show something to people they haven't seen before. You want to create something unique, but also it needs to be a reflection of you. But I think a lot with these sort of fairy tales and concepts, there's a lot to read into it. I think there's a lot of metaphor. So it's a lot of bringing someone else's experience into the picture. So I don't feel like I'm trying to push my agenda necessarily, but I think there are some deeper truths in here. And I don't want to seem so cryptic, but I do think, I am bringing my experience as, a woman into a lot of these pieces. And I think there's a lot to discuss with the mirror and sort of issues with that. So I don't know. It's like, I just don't want to be too specific about my agenda sometimes, because then I don't think that leaves enough space for interpretation, the viewer.
And connection for the viewer. I that's really interesting that you say it like that. Because these are huge themes.
Right. And I will leave little breadcrumbs, and are Easter eggs that people like to say that now, right? So I'll do that, because I do think that's what keeps the works giving more. I don't want it to be something too specific that then you're like, okay, I just figured this out. And then you walk away. You want them to keep giving so that you can, especially like if they're collected, for people to live with them and have them be something that they want to have in their home for, decades.
Well, it's kind of like the everlasting gobstopper. It's like the evergreen challenge, right? Like when you see a Kelly O'Connor, like you walk into your own house, even you see a Kelly O'Connor piece, what it could mean to you today could be something very different than what it means to you 10 years from now. Like as you go through your life events and as you go through things, that's the power of art, right?
Yes.
And how really effective art that communicates something, it gives us a more universal message that it evolves with us as we go
that's
through.
Such a great way of putting it. And they're literally reflective, but then they're also like reflective of your inner psyche. So
then before we get up and go to the kitchen, can you explain?
Oh, yes. So,
not part of Deepfake, however, the coolest collection of one of your eras.
One of somebody else who was like a huge inspiration to me during my time at Shinati Foundation was Tony Farrer, who's actually from Texas, but has had, he had an amazing career in New York and internationally. He's now deceased. But he really inspired me to kind of look at these vessels in a whole new way. He worked a lot with like plastic bottles and colorful liquids. But I grew up with a mother that was an Avon lady.
Oh, yes. Oh my God, I love that. My mom's first job was for Avon.
I know, that's so cool.
She typed the labels on the back.
I would have loved to see what your mom wore to work.
God, I know, in the 80s, early 80s in New York City.
I've got to see.
She said she was 22 and she had an office that overlooked Central Park. Can you even imagine?
I cannot. And
no.
Oh, I just want to see everything. Her hair,
Me too.
Everything.
I don't even have pictures. Like they never took anything.
She needs to pull these out of the archives.
She does. Yeah. Anyway, I interrupt. Avon bottles. Your mom was an Avon sales lady.
And so,
at Avon parties.
I think, the smell of these perfumes I do not think these were things I would ever want on my skin these days.
When we worked with them, when we created content years ago, I remember like opening the lipsticks and everything. It was like, it's such a strong.
And I think this is a common theme in a lot of my work. It's like this attraction to the surface and then a repulsion to like the beneath the surface.
Interesting.
So there's a strong attraction to my, Disney, to these, tales, but then like you start to kind of, go behind the facade of them and they start to reveal themselves. And there's things that you're like, okay, now I feel conflicted. And I like that juxtaposition of things you're attracted to, but then, are like, oh, cringe. The cringe. Yeah. So these bottles are, mostly Avon bottles that I've kind of dissected and then put different liquids in, like different pigments and stuff. But many of the bottles I just think are so gorgeous. And I've arranged them in these sort of, monochromatic displays. I don't know. I think these bottles are still like evolving. Like I would love one day to do something, maybe like ceramic, like something that's more of a vase, like maybe even something that's more practical, like for your home, for home decor, like a tablescape installation with flowers and stuff. And I did get to dabble in this recently in an exhibition I had last fall in Victoria, Texas. We did like a whole installation of them with beautiful orchids and stuff. So,
oh man, we should sometime do a party.
Oh, that would be so lovely.
Where there's
and then
a
we
long
can do a
table.
Yes. I would love to do that. That is what I really want to do. Like I could see them like that, but I also could see like working with a fabricator. That's something I really want to do, is kind of enter a more commercial space where I can not mass produce, but produce things on a scale, like an edition sort of scale where you could take that, say like a beautiful glass Jergens bottle and make it like a vase.
Oh, how cool. Yeah. And even, coming up with like a Kelly O'Connor tablescape. Yeah. Where you had pieces that went down but then you had, the tablecloths and you could do themed parties. I know. Oh my God.
Well, this leads into like our question about what would I be doing if I was not Kelly O'Connor, the artist. So I just love interior design. And I say that as a novice and somebody that's doing it on my own schedule. I think being an interior designer is incredibly hard. Working with clients, like it's such a long process and I think it can be very challenging, but I do love interior design so much. Like when I'm in my studio, I love having on, interior design YouTube videos. Yeah. That's something like, please send me any of your recommendations. I would need more and more things to digest interior design wise. But yeah, that's something I love doing as like my hobby.
Well, it's apparent that is what you love. I mean, your entire home is brimming with home and studio, just brimming with creativity.
It's a work in process.
But that brings me to, let's go to the kitchen and see one of the areas which you've designed. But also one of our questions was, what is your favorite cocktail? Because you're such a cocktail connoisseur and you're always posting from your kitchen, dishes that you're making and cocktails that you're creating.
I know. I would love if, like, I think once my children are grown, I think I will settle into my more Martha Stewart phase, and I'll get to, nurture that side of myself of really doing things beautiful all the time instead of whipping meals together.
Yeah. Okay. So now, let's go to the kitchen.
Sounds great. Okay. So, are you ready? These really are my favorite cocktails. I was going to make two of them. One of them is sweet, and then the other one, it has like no sugar because, I think that's the thing with cocktails. It's like you can have one or two sweet ones, but then you really want no sugar. So one of the key things that we've invested in that I think is just so worth it is the crushed ice. So we have this little, crushed ice maker. You don't even have to hook it up to a water line. It is the easiest thing. It's simplified my life. I used to like haul bags of ice from the grocery store. It's so worth it. You can get it on Amazon. We can like link it later or something. And then it's always nice to invest in like nice barware, even though this is not quite the investment. This is just like an IKEA glass, but it's so cute. And then this is my friend Heath. He is a metal artist, and he did this cool flag. This is so kind of in tune to what we've been talking about. Look, it's like one of the Disney flags. It's like, you know, a flag in motion, and he specially did them for me. I'm so happy and lucky. And we'll link Heath later too. He lives in Brooklyn. Okay, so the first one I was going to do is a paper plane. You just need 4 things. You need lemon juice, which, I mean, who has time to squeeze lemons? You can go to your grocery store and get lemon juice that's freshly squeezed, not the stuff that's living on the shelves for a year. And then you need Amaro, which this is my favorite one, the lo-fi one. And you need some sort of bitters. You know, you could either do Campari. I just do this one. I think it's like a good value. And you need bourbon. So I like bullet bourbon. That's what I typically do. This is so easy. Like, that's why I'm going to show you too, because like you will do this so fast. So you just do equal parts of those 4 things. It really is just so simple. So I think you could just do, you know, what do you call the smaller one? I know the bigger one is called a jigger. This one's just like a shot. So you do equal parts bitters, equal parts Amaro, and equal parts bourbon and lemon juice. And what I like about this is it's so refreshing, even though it's bourbon. You know, that kind of seems like a little intense, but this is like such a good summer cocktail. And we're in San Antonio, so you like really need refreshing stuff like almost all year round. Like today, isn't it 80 degrees? And we are still in March. So there's no way I can drink this right now. I'll definitely have it later, but I'll take a sip. It's so refreshing because with all the bitters, it doesn't make it too sweet. That's why I love all, you know, these aperitifs. I think they're just like so easy. Instead of having to put things like simple syrup and stuff, like it's better just to do it in your liquor. So that was yes, that was the aperitif, the more sweet but definitely sort of bitter tasting one. And then this one also is so simple and it's just so good. It's like a nice sort of botanical martini. So often we think of martinis as being like, you know, dirty olive juice and stuff. This one's just like super clean. I would typically use a lemon zest, but I did not have one. I saw Stanley Tucci do this. He like rubs the zest on the rim so you get the good oils from the zest in there. He said that some people don't like that, but I think it's nice. I think it's so subtle, you kind of need that. I'm doing one that's more of a citrus gin. I do love gin. I'm sorry. I think vodka just doesn't have very much flavor, and I just love a gin. So this one is more citrusy. This is almost like a little bit of a spicy citrusy martini. I just like to put a little bit of bitters in there, and this is a smoked chili bitter. So really 1 drop is going to do plenty for you. And then I also have a citrus bitters, which is kind of nice. Some people like to use a new umami bitters, which I have too, and I think that's always really nice. But this one is going to be more on the sort of spicy, citrusy side. And then we just put, I'll do the jigger side of the gin and pour it into the shaker with the crushed ice. And then I like vermouth. Some people want it totally dry, but I've been having really good. Get the vermouth. It's not that much more expensive, but something that's like a little higher end than the Campari, I think makes it nicer. And so for the vermouth, I really try to just do like the tiniest bit, like not even a full capful. But it just gives it a little extra flavor. And then we're going to shake it. And we like to shake it enough so then you kind of have like a little slurry of ice on top. What's nice is it's not sweet at all, so it's just so easy to drink. Cheers!
This. I just want to sit by your pool.
Okay.
With our cocktail.
All right, that sounds
So we're
good.
gonna go to the pool and share.